Buenos dias and gracias. Yesterday, Benjamin Bull was Alan Sears, and today Alan Sears is Rocco Buttaglione. I'm very honored to be with you. Yesterday we had 5-hour plane delay, and today we had no delays, so thank you very much for allowing the substitution. Dear friends, we are facing fierce battles for the future of freedom across the globe. First and foremost of all freedoms is the freedom of religion. It is a gift of God, and it is one that is given to and granted by God to all men, not by government. It is the role of government to protect and preserve that liberty. Religious liberty is under attack on countless fronts, from those taking the lives with whom they disagree, such as the cases that we're involved in supporting in Orissa, India, to those who simply want to silence all dissent, those who in the name of tolerance and equality want to close the mouths and close the ability of those they disagree with to worship and to act according to their faith and their conscience. But the good news is that these are battles that, working together and with God's grace, we can all play an important role in winning. And by the way, I would mention, many times, winning is not just getting something new accomplished. It is often stopping something that is evil or destructive from occurring. In my country, such are the battles with an administration in Washington, D.C., and its ACLU and Planned Parenthood counterparts, that all seem hell-bent on abating the destruction of life, the compromise of conscience, the redefinition of marriage, the erosion of religious freedom across our nation in ways never seen before in the history of our republic. And of course, as these things affect us in the United States of America, they affect you across the globe. We're facing an administration in Washington that is strong-arming officials across the nation to use their state taxpayers' dollars to underwrite abortion. And many of you have heard about something even worse. They have issued their mandate, a dictatorial decree ordering all employers, even religious organizations, to provide abortion-inducing drugs, sterilizations, and more, supposedly free of charge, like everything else the government has that is free of charge. All of this in direct violation of our conscience and our faith. This is on top of earlier schemes to radically change the healthcare system in the U.S. and to use taxpayer dollars to fund surgical abortion. This mandate is one of the greatest threats to religious liberty in the history of my nation. And none of the so-called Obama revisions change a thing. The issue has become white hot. Catholic bishops have courageously drawn a line in the sand, and they have told the administration that they will not cross. Last Monday, more than 43 Catholic dioceses and other organizations filed a lawsuit against the unconstitutional mandate. The leader of America's Catholic bishops, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who prays for President Obama and his administration every day, says, "When the government tampers with the freedoms so fundamental to the life of our nation, one shudders to think of what lies ahead." And all of us should be concerned with what lies ahead. But this is very far from a Catholic issue, as Dr. Patterson and others will tell you. It is a threat to every and all persons of faith. Richard Land, who is president of the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission in the U.S., says, "We will not comply with this mandate." Evangelical pastor and author Rick Warren says, I'll go to jail rather than to cave into the government mandate that violates what God commands us to do. Rick Warren is the largest selling author of Christian books in the United States. Al Mohler, president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, says, "Our religious liberty is being subverted and attacked. We cannot and we will not comply with this unjust law." And of course, so far, the Obama administration's reaction, they ignore and they shrug. They marvel at the fuss, and they tell churches and dioceses and ministries and seminaries to go to the back of the bus, to shut up, to obey, and to pay. Well, ADF and our many allies and friends are not taking these attacks lightly. In addition to the lawsuits that the Catholic bishops have filed, ADF has filed a lawsuit against this unconstitutional mandate on behalf of Geneva College, a historic 100-year-old plus Reformed Presbyterian school in Pennsylvania, which president has stood up to the administration decree, and the president of Geneva says, there's only one God, and he's not in Washington, D.C. ADF has also filed lawsuits on behalf of Louisiana Baptist College and a Denver manufacturer. It's one of my favorite case names. I don't know how this will translate into the Spanish, but it's Hercules versus Obama. More lawsuits to come, including other large evangelical colleges in the U.S. And with God's grace, we will win these cases. The Obama administration will be stopped from being allowed to further this mandate in violation of our religious liberty. But however, as serious as that fight is, and it is a very serious fight, as all of you know, that battle is just one front on an ongoing war for the soul of our nation and for our globe, for all of our nations, and religious liberty. My purpose this morning, though, is not to just simply engage in a diatribe against our administration in Washington and its outrages, such as its effort now to substitute, very careful language here, to substitute freedom of worship for freedom of religion. The administration's substitution of language for freedom of worship basically is to grant to Americans the same religious liberty that those held in the former Soviet-dominated countries, the freedom to do within the four walls of the church whatever one wants to do, but when one steps outside the church, to not be allowed to practice their faith, as Francisco and other speakers will be addressing in a few moments. You all read the newspapers, you watch the television, you scan the internet, and all of you are aware of the similar kinds of threats in all of your own countries. The attack on conscience to healthcare providers, caseworkers, are just absolutely almost unbelievable in the United States. We have more and more cases where people of faith, Catholics, evangelicals, and others are being ordered as a condition of continued employment to participate in abortion or to provide abortion-inducing drugs. Not too long ago, the Alliance Defense Fund was involved in representing 12 pro-life nurses from across different denominational faith Christian lines at the University of Medicine and Dentistry in New Jersey. We were successful in winning for them the right to no longer have to participate in abortion as a continued condition of employment. At a major college in the United States, the Vanderbilt University in Tennessee, as a condition of applying for the nurses' residency program, one had to agree in writing in the application to participate in training on the performance of abortion as a condition to even apply to the graduate school. I'm delighted to tell you that we were able to get that removed. A Catholic nurse in Louisiana was told as a condition of continued employment at her hospital, she had to provide the so-called morning after abortion pill. And that case goes on. We've had a successful victory in that case, but there are some appeals still pending. The Montana Board of Pharmacy and other boards of pharmacy have taken the position that pharmacists must issue these death pills. They must do this as a continuance of their license. We've been very successful in the Montana case at winning that. There's a case that's been won in the Washington state against that Board of Pharmacy that is now an appeal to what's called our Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. But these cases continue at many different levels. But as I said, I'm not here just to talk about the negative. Let's also talk about hope. And the hope is that when we show up, when we stand up, when we pray, as our president said, when we call out to the Lord, we can have victory and we can have success. You know, the proverb reminds us that it's always darkest before dawn. But we're working to make the day of religious freedom more of a reality on this planet. And despite what you hear in the mainstream media, there is lots of good news out there on different fronts. One of the cases that we were involved in here in the European Union, we represented 33 members of the European Union Parliament from 12 countries who united to stand with Italy in the Lauzi v. Italy case, when the right to have a crucifix in the public schools was challenged. And as you know, the upper chamber of the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg ruled strongly in favor of allowing nations to preserve their history and heritage in these public ways. Another thing that we're doing in the United States that is an issue for people in the clergy, for ministries around the world, is defending the right of pastors, preachers, evangelists to speak freely and frankly from their pulpits. With the pulpit initiative we launched in the United States, we are directly confronting government efforts on every level to try to intimidate and silence pastors. The simple question for us is this: who decides what may be said in the pulpit? If a pastor, a priest, is called by God to preach, who is allowed to decide what message is delivered from the pulpit? Is the message decided by the church, by the pastor, by the church leadership, or is it decided by the government? So it's another simple issue. It's God or government. Who decides what may be said in the pulpit? In the United States, our Internal Revenue Service has asserted that it is a condition of being allowed to have a tax-exempt status that you must maintain silence on certain topics related to public policy and public officials in the pulpits of our churches. Pastors across the United States have decided to step up and stand out on this issue. They have prayerfully gathered, and as we stand here this morning, somewhere around 800 pastors in the United States have knowingly violated the Internal Revenue Service guidelines, and they have actually mailed into the government agency a DVD or CD of their sermons. What we're hoping is that the IRS official who's opening and hearing and watching those sermons, Dr. Patterson, has had a profound faith conversion. And we've also had many attacks in the U.S. on the church, aside from the words of the pastors in the pulpits, such as limitations on building restrictions. For example, attempts through land use laws to say, oh, you can't build a steeple, you can't go over a certain height, you can't increase the size of your parking lot, you've got too many members, you're too successful, we want to restrict the land. And we've been involved in a number of cases standing up in this area, and with God's grace, we've seen significant success pushing back, standing and fighting. Another area is what we in the U.S. call equal access, and that is the issue of whether or not people of faith are allowed to use public forums, say like this Congress, with the same terms and conditions as all other people. We have various governments across the United States that have said there are two sets of rules. There is one set of rule for the secular organizations, and there is another set of rule for the religious organizations. Either we will not allow the religious organizations to use the property or the facility at all for any price, or we will have different conditions, such as restrictions on content, restrictions on advertising, and price differences. So, for example, maybe the Congress Hall would rent to a secular group for 10,000 euro. It would rent to the Christian group for 20,000 euro. We've had, again, significant success in pushing back on these outrages. The last thing in my limited time I want to tell you about in the U.S. is a series of cases that might, again, be interesting and useful as you stand in your own countries. The public and tax-funded universities in the United States, like all of your schools across your continent here in Europe and the different countries that are represented here, are the primary teachers of thousands upon thousands of young people. In the United States, more of our students go to the publicly funded universities than all of the religious and non-secular schools combined. We decided some time ago, based upon the complaints we were hearing, that we would do an investigation, and then we launched a project called our University Project to respond to discrimination against Christians and Orthodox Jews, people of faith, on the public college campuses. And we have been blessed to have now more than 1 100 victories against the largest and most well-funded schools in the United States for their discrimination against people of faith. We have knocked down non-discrimination policies that require Christian ministries to have non-Christian leaders. We have knocked down so-called speech codes that silence Christian speech, that say that certain parts of Christian doctrine, even passages from the Bible, are off limits from public discussion. We have had speech codes which tell us that there are certain things that may not be talked about in different ways. The denial of equal access I talked about, where different people have different rules. And then finally, we have strongly stood up to academic retribution. These are acts of punishment for students who have declared their faith, such as one young man in a Los Angeles community college talked about the sanctity of marriage between one man and one woman. And he was called all sorts of profane names by his professor, and the professor refused to grade his final examination because he had held up marriage as between a man and a woman. The bottom line of all this is the question of what public tax-supported universities are and what they should be. Are they a place that are to be open to all citizens? Are they a place only open to people who do not have faith or will not stand or exercise their faith? Are they a place of purging and censorship or a place for free interchange of ideas? And it's been really interesting to me to watch these intellectuals who advocate liberty, tolerance, and all of these things, who then will with the same breath say, well, we're not going to tolerate the intolerant, as they call us. These battles and all these others that we face this morning, as we stand together, will shape much of what our nations and our world will look like tomorrow. So I would ask that we all stand together, that we not allow these offenses to go unaddressed, that we stand in unity with our brothers and sisters, no matter what type of attack they may have. Let's think that they're all our individual responsibilities, not just some terrible thing that we would think about and watch occur. And with prayer and with steadfast effort, I am confident that we can go forward in a world with the basic and most inalienable right of all human persons, that of religious freedom, well preserved for our children and our children's children for the next generations. Thank you so very much.